Some college students will tell you it's tough enough getting up the money to attend classes at OU, or any other college for that matter. But the Reagan administration wants to make it tougher. For the 83-84 budget, the Reagan administration wants to cut aid to Oklahoma students by about $20 million. But Senate Bill 400, if passed, will take up some slack by offering an increase in state aid to those qualified, from 50% of a year's tuition with a maximum of $500 to 75% with a $1,000 maximum. OU's financial aid director says it will help, but some students will be cut off from any aid.
There's no doubt about that. There isn't any doubt that the colleges and the students are going to suffer if, in fact, if it stays in place like it is.
Davis admits it is going to be tough on some students with the cuts, but he says he still believes that the students who really want to attend college will find the money somehow. Ted Brown, Action 4 in Norman.
And to be very fortunate with the man we have.
Competition from unregulated money market mutual funds is slowly squeezing savings and loan institutions out of the financial market. The main reason they've been hit so hard is because the majority of their investments center around long-term real estate mortgages, which bring in much lower interest rates than they're required to pay out. Banks, too, are feeling the pressure, but not so severely. Both institutions advocate some kind of deregulation so they can be allowed to compete on the same level with money market mutual funds.
The banks are willing to play by, whatever rules are set out for us, but we want those rules to be fair. And that is not the situation right now. We feel like that we are regulated more than the institutions with whom we have to compete.
A federal deregulation committee will soon be deciding what kind of legislation can help troubled S&Ls, but also ensure fairness to banks. The proposals are lengthy, but if passed, should give a boost to now regulated monetary institutions. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
This is a new multi-story parking garage here at Will Rogers World Airport. And beneath this parking lot lies a multi-million-dollar tunnel. That tunnel is used to transport travelers from this parking lot to the terminal. But as Rodney Dangerfield would say, this tunnel ain't getting no respect. Here comes a typical traveler carrying his bags from his car to the terminal. Whoops, he just missed a $2.5 million ride. If he would have taken the yellow elevator down one floor, he could have ridden on the state's only moving sidewalk. When this transport tunnel was opened to the public last month, airport officials had high hopes travelers would flock to the subterranean passageway. But so far, riders have been as scarce as termites at a raid convention.
It is, number one, for their own safety because the tunnel goes on under all the traffic above that first level. The passenger doesn't have to dodge cars in the existing parking facility, and he has also the convenience of air conditioning. It keeps him out of the weather and keeps the ladies out of those strong Oklahoma winds here, so we highly recommend its use.
One reason people avoid the tunnel may be because they don't know what's there. Only a few signs point to the passageway, and most of those markers are hard to find. But travelers who have tried the tunnel say they like it.
I think it's great. Saves me getting out in the snow, in the wind.
I'm impressed with what I've seen so far. I think I like the conveyor belts and all that, so that should be pretty nice.
The airport plans to erect new, larger signs soon so that passengers who want to use the tunnel can find it. Scott Wallace, Action 4, Will Rogers World Airport.
This woman's being brought in from another hospital because she's expected to have a high-risk delivery. Transfer pregnancies such as this are causing serious overcrowding problems for Oklahoma's hospitals. If her baby does need to be in intensive care, there probably won't be any room for it. But the transfers aren't the only reason there's no space. Mercy Health Center's director of nursery says there are 3 other factors involved.
The increasing numbers of deliveries in the state of Oklahoma, a very substantial increase from 40,000 or so to in excess of 60,000 or so. So really a 50% increase in the numbers of deliveries is the major problem. On top of that is the fortunate increase in people's expectations. And finally, during this time in which there's greater demand and greater numbers of babies, we've not really had any increase in the facilities for this care in the state.
That shortage of personnel has caused some facilities to cut back in the number of beds used. The hospitals can't simply hire more nurses because it takes a year of special training to work in the neonatal intensive care unit. But not all hospitals need more nurses. Some need only beds or both. So the answer to the overcrowding problem will have to be a combination of more beds and increased staff.
A simpler answer for the parents is to have the mother referred to the hospital before the child is born. An inborn infant stands a much better chance of receiving an intensive care bed like this. Sherry Sellers, Action 4 at the Mercy Health Center.
Reworking and refurbishing airplane parts and engines is what Tinker's Air Logistics Center is all about. The production work at Tinker is supervised and managed by the Air Force. There's the rub. The Defense Department says it can do a better job of overseeing the production of sophisticated jet engines and parts.
The proposed management change here at the Air Logistics Center is another effort by Washington to consolidate and economize. However, officials here believe it would have just the reverse effect.
Now, our contention is, and the other services, the Air Force as well as the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, believe that we can better manage the more complex weapon-related items. They're more costly, their demands are more erratic, their lead times are longer, all of which makes it much more difficult to manage.
Next Friday, Tinker officials will tell members of the House Armed Services Subcommittee that they can run this facility better than federal bureaucrats thousands of miles away in Washington. Also, Tinker officials insist the subcommittee is only concerned about improving management, not about disappearing inventory like the multi-million-dollar naval loss in Norfolk. Larry Audis, Action 4, Tinker Field.
Filling out the yearly tax form isn't pleasant for anyone. You have the option of asking the IRS for help, like this woman, paying someone to do it for you, or you can do it yourself. But no matter how you do it, you also have the option of being honest. The saying goes that cheaters never win, but that doesn't necessarily apply to taxes. In 1980, only about 17,500 individual returns from Oklahoma were audited. That out of more than 1.1 million filed. In 81, there were more returns filed, but fewer audits. Audits went down by about 3,000, while returns went up by about 45,000. That's less than 2% audited, but the IRS says don't feel like you can cheat and get away with it.
The system is set up in a way that it is not a random sampling, but rather it looks for discrepancies. So if an individual, say, they earned an average salary, a joint income perhaps of $20,000, they indicated that they gave $5,000 to a charity. And there may be some other discrepancies on their return. Let's say they chose to, quote, cheat in that manner. Quite likely, we would be talking to them.
Officials at the General Accounting Office say that cheating is becoming more of a problem nationally. They say it may have something to do with the poor state of the economy. However, IRS officials in Oklahoma say cheating is no worse than it was in previous years. And that may be because Oklahoma is in better shape economically than the rest of the nation. Ted Brown, Action 4 Downtown.
There's some bad news, some strange news, and some good news about education in Oklahoma City. The bad news concerns teachers and other employees.
20 and 9 makes...
Reaganomics has hit the Oklahoma City public schools. Because of reduced funding, between 45 and 50 school employees will have to be laid off. 4 or 5 teachers will be without jobs. The rest are teacher aides and non-certified personnel. The cutback will directly affect programs in reading and math for educationally disadvantaged students. These services will have to be cut back, and Superintendent Tom Pezant isn't happy about it.
It will reduce the quantity and quality of service that we're able to provide in the programs that are designed to provide supplementary education for disadvantaged children.
I'm a parent from Star Elementary School.
The strange news involves this woman, Jerry Reagan. Her son was hurt in the Star Spencer explosion. Now she's opposed to the $32 million school bond issue because she says not enough money is going towards building safety. Last night, Reagan told the school board her opposition to the bond issue has caused her lots of trouble.
Since March 1st, I've been harassed, told there was a contract out on me, and my car has been torn apart.
Pezant says he's disturbed by the threats against Mrs. Reagan, but he says that unfortunately, that's part of being in the public eye. All you can do is hope the calls turn out to be crank calls.
Voters in Logan, Lincoln, Seminole, and Pottawatomie counties straggled into voting precincts throughout the day. They had 2 choices on today's ballot. Bill Dawson was running on the Democratic ticket, and Rodney McCrory headlined for the Republicans. Both men have had prior experience in politics and campaigning. Dawson once held the state Senate seat, and McCrory unsuccessfully ran for the position in 1978. A look at tonight's unofficial tally puts Bill Dawson back in the winner's circle once again. Here's a breakdown of the voting in each county. Though a small turnout in Pottawatomie, voters chose Dawson 40-8. Logan County stacked up 469 votes for Dawson, with McCrory trailing behind at 355. Seminole County showed overwhelming favor for Dawson with over 2,000 votes, compared to 664 for McCrory. But the latter found stronger support in Lincoln County. McCrory led Dawson 832 to 781. The unofficial results showed Dawson winning the state Senate seat by over 1,600 votes. The official tally from today's election should be finished by this Friday. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
This is the view from the cargo hold of the Columbia, looking back toward the tail. The black of space silhouetted the spaceship as a remotely controlled camera scanned the experiments, working but not moving while the astronauts and mission control discussed a failing tape recorder that was supposed to record some of the results. That's the wing, and no tiles were missing in this critical area, so no problems expected on Monday when the astronauts fly back to Earth. And the cabin, its windows at the top. Those are the windows that have been fogging up for the last 2 days, somewhat obscuring the view. Last night, the astronauts sounded tired at the end of a very long, hard day. Shuttle astronaut Major James Buchli is here. Jim, how did they sound today?
Roy, this morning they sounded very chipper. They seemed to be adapting very well to the flight, and I think from now on we'll see the flight plan being flown and carried out more vigorously, and all of our objectives met.
And the way it's turned out, that the people has really been wonderful to us here, you know, with the computations and everything that, you know, that they have gave us here in the motel room and the unemployment office and everything. It makes me feel like people do care about one another here in Oklahoma.
Mary Cochran has recently gotten a first-hand helping of Oklahoma hospitality. She and her husband and 2 sons moved to Oklahoma from Florida last week. With no job, low on cash, and only a car to sleep in, things were looking pretty grim for the Cochran family. But a visit to the state employment office and more changed all that.
There have been offers of money, clothing, groceries. We have picked up boxes of groceries all over this town and all over southwest Oklahoma City. The phones have just been ringing money. People wanting to know their clothes sizes so that they can send clothing to them, pots and pans, anything. You couldn't name anything that someone has an offer to give.
The employment office got things rolling for William Cochran. Tubular Services and more put him to work right away. His boss says William is a good employee. The Cochrans' good fortune was compounded this week when some Samaritans found a mobile home for them to move into. Mary is looking forward to having a kitchen again so she can cook some hot meals for her family. Scott Wallace, Action 4 and more.
Thalidomide proved to be the catalyst for tightening up the regulation. 20 years ago, the drug that had been approved for use in Western Europe turned into a nightmare when pregnant women took it to relieve morning sickness. Animal tests could not predict the deformative children born to those taking thalidomide. But the drug never hit the United States market because the FDA had not been convinced the drug was safe.
I think that there was a reaction, since they saved us from that, to try to make sure that these drugs didn't have toxic effects.
Has it gone too far?
I would think that probably it did go too far.
I think it's a good process. It may be, it is slow. I know it is slow. But you have to understand the tremendous pressure that they operate on, because they're always going to be under attack.
The delay in the time drugs are used in other countries until they're approved in this country is called drug lag. There are many reasons for it.
Sometimes companies prefer to develop a drug overseas if the drug was initially synthesized or discovered there. And then the drug can be tested there by researchers who understand the drug, and then it's brought into other countries.
One such case is a drug called verapamil, a heart drug that has been prescribed by European doctors for more than 18 years. But only within the last 2 years did any drug company ask for American approval.
Some of the early data from Europe suggested perhaps only limited benefit, perhaps some potential for toxicity in animals, and the firms were just not enthusiastic enough to go through the approval process.
Today, many physicians are enthusiastic about verapamil. Another reason some drug companies try to get their drug approved here is the way U.S. patent laws are written. Patents usually last 17 years, and FDA approval can take 2/3 that time.
The Reagan administration has taken the position that there ought to be some provision for extending the exclusive marketing rights of a drug if it's been a long time in the approval process. But FDA itself is not directly concerned with that.
It is the agency this man works for, the Food and Drug Administration, that is the target for most of the drug lag criticism. In our next report, a look at the red tape many say is responsible for effective, safe drugs being kept off the American market. This is Jerry Adams reporting. Let's say each of these dots represent a new chemical substance some researchers hope will be a useful drug. Under the current system in this country, 10,000 of these dots would have to go by before one of them would ever make it through the Food and Drug Administration approval process to market.
The problem is that the FDA often moves very, very slowly.
Here's why it takes so long for drugs to reach United States shelves. A research team comes up with a drug that looks promising. Now it's time for the first of a series of drug company tests. It is first tested on animals to show it does what it's supposed to do and doesn't expose humans to unnecessary risks. If it's gotten this far, then a plan to give it to people is drawn up. It's called a protocol.
This defect was proven to be benign. That is, it does not contain cancer cells.
That's reviewed by the FDA. If it gets okayed, a small group receives the drug first to determine how it acts chemically, what a safe dose would be, and how it should be administered. Then a large group is given a double-blind study where one group gets the chemical and the other gets a dummy substance. All of the results are painstakingly documented, most often now by computer. FDA field laboratories monitoring. Only after all this does the drug have a shot at the U.S. marketplace. From discovery to approval takes from 7 to 10 years and could cost as much as $70 million.
I don't think that the FDA would compromise its position of protecting the public by helping industry to get approvals for new drugs in the quickest possible time at the lowest possible cost.
This administration has tried to develop a cooperative relationship with the drug industry so that all unnecessary barriers can be removed to the prompt development of new drugs.
Delays are caused by other factors. Some drugs just don't have much commercial value and no one wants to make them. And there are drugs the FDA won't approve simply because no one knows enough about them. This is one of them, a controversial chemical that some say is as revolutionary as aspirin, while others say it is useless and sometimes dangerous. That story on our next report. This is Jerry Adams reporting.
After just about any crime, everyone involved in it sooner or later ends up at the courthouse. Right now, this corner down here is reserved for the victims or other witnesses. They come here to wait until prosecutors need them in the courtroom. Otherwise, they'd end up waiting in the halls with the sane people accused of doing something nasty to them.
You're sitting out there in the hallway, you're with the defendants. People walk by and they think you're the guilty person. They wonder, what are you doing there? This way I can come in here, I can sit and relax, I can have a cup of coffee, and I know that, hey, I'm on the right side of things. But I've You know, I've been out in the hallway before and had people that know me in town want to know what I'm doing in here. Did you get busted for open saloon? Did you get busted for this? And hell no. I'm just here to testify.
But Cleveland County Commissioners want the center's space for the sheriff's office. That means the center has to move to somewhere.
I am, as of the way it stands right now, ordered to move by tomorrow. I'm supposed to be out today. You know, this is the last day that this center is supposed to be in existence in its present space. And there is nothing available to move to, so it's just, I'm sorry, but it's time to move.
The county commissioners want the center moved behind the courthouse to District Attorney Kay Huff's offices. Huff says she doesn't have the room, and besides, the center needs to be kept near the courtrooms where victims, witnesses, and anyone else who needs help can find it. One commissioner says Huff does have the space, and the walk from there isn't a problem.
I personally walked from the second floor of the new section of the courthouse to the basement of the old courthouse where her office, where the Victim Witness Center is presently located, and it took me 2 minutes.
They're overcrowded as it is. They may have big offices if they were divided down a little differently, maybe, but still there's a need to have it in this building.
The Victim Witness Center is supposed to be closed tomorrow by the county commissioners, but the director says she has too many witnesses coming in who otherwise would not know where to go, so she plans on conducting business as usual. Ted Brown, Action 4 at the Cleveland County Courthouse.
Emeralds are precious stones with legends of wealth and beauty. They're also synonymous with expensive price tags. But now people in Oklahoma are seeing a dip in those prices. The John A. Brown department store, in conjunction with a Brazilian firm, has bought an emerald mine in the South American country. The result is that several middlemen have been cut out, and savings from 35% to 50% are being passed on to customers. But no purchase is a bargain unless the product is worth its value. Gem expert Richard Teig suggests these tips to remember when buying any precious stone.
We have the service available that is needed to, number one, help you select the color of a stone, number two, the absence of imperfections, and number three, the clarity of a stone. And once you get professional guidance, that is how I would advocate people to buy a stone, not through back alleys and other means.
If more American companies get involved in partnerships with foreign mining firms, Teig says many stones, especially emeralds, may decrease in price and rise in popularity. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
This is her brand new car. She hasn't even made a payment on it yet.
U.S. Marines intervened repeatedly in Nicaragua's internal affairs during the early 1900s to put down rebellions and to protect American commercial interests. Not until 1933 did they withdraw for good, leaving behind a dictatorial dynasty established by Anastasio Somoza, a U.S.-trained National Guard commander. It was President Theodore Roosevelt who provided the institutional rationale for intervention. His corollary to the Monroe Doctrine claimed America's right to exercise police power in this hemisphere. When the building of the Panama Canal was blocked by Colombia, Roosevelt simply helped carve out a new nation, Panama, and then made a treaty with it. Under General Smedley Butler, the Marines turned the Caribbean into an American lake during the early part of the century. Under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the United States With President Dwight Eisenhower's approval, the CIA went to work organizing, training, and arming an exile force which overthrew the freely elected government of Arbenz. 7 years later, a similar operation failed miserably at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. An army of Cuban exiles, also organized and trained by the CIA, was quickly overwhelmed by the forces of Fidel Castro. President John F. Kennedy refused to provide air cover for the exiles. After leading a triumphal revolution to power in 1959, Castro drifted steadily into the Soviet orbit, expropriating millions of dollars worth of American property along the way. The specter of Castro haunted the Civil War, which broke out in the nearby Dominican Republic in 1965, when supporters of deposed President Juan Bosch tried to restore him to power. President Lyndon Johnson sent Marines and troopers of the 82nd Airborne to Santo Domingo to restore order, and he left no doubt why.
The American nation cannot, must not, and will not permit the establishment of another communist government in the Western Hemisphere.